you a few questions.
Sure.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for taking this time to conduct this interview with me.
No problem.
So my first question is, looking back in terms of like how you started in cosplay and how you now, like in your mind, how much did you progress over the years?
Quite a bit, because when I first started cosplaying, I didn't know anything. Like, I was, I've always been kind of artistic, so I would do like paintings and drawings and stuff like that, but I had no idea how to use a sewing machine or anything.
Right.
So when I first got into it, I literally had to learn how to sew and craft. And so over the years, I've just kept developing that skill and stuff and worked more at it, and then, able to do what I am doing now. So, and I even got to I worked as a tailor for like 4 years, so that actually really helped teach me a lot of information about how garments are constructed and kind of make myself faster at sewing. And then in terms of like the community, it's changed a lot too since then. Like, and then just the sheer fact, like resources available to cosplayers, like being able to get wigs easily in that from sellers here in the U.S. is crazy. Like I remember when I first started cosplaying, like you had 10 wig options. It was like bright neon pink, neon yellow, and stuff like that. And then now we have all these really cool things like Warbla and all that. That's really easy to use, and it's pretty easy to get fabrics and stuff. And there's a big, huge community now that helps people. Whereas before, like the internet was still kind of, a little bit in its infancy. We didn't have Facebook and MySpace and all these cosplay, places to go. And so it was a little bit more difficult to get that information out. So now I feel it's a lot easier to be a cosplayer in 2015 than it was in 2005.
I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm. As somebody who also cosplays, like the stuff back then was a lot harder to get, and even if you could like somehow magically get it, like you were like looked at like, oh man, your costume's awesome. Yeah. But now it's a lot easier to get what you need. Yeah. And you go online, get Waldo, whatever fabric you need, and order it. Don't have to worry about trying to find treasure hunting all these items and stuff. Mm-hmm. But speaking of the community, what was your kind of first thought? Like, cause as you were growing up in the community and kind of cosplaying and making friends, what in your opinion is the community now than what it is then?
It's definitely different. I remember when I first started, it obviously was a lot smaller back then. Because I started cosplaying like 11 years ago. So everyone, I remember like you would go and you would see other people and you're like, oh, cool, you're wearing that, and you would make new friends and stuff like that. Sometimes it's a little difficult now to do that. People seem to have kind of like their groups and they do their thing, which is totally fine. So the community is a little bit different. I feel like it's a little bit more divided. Like people's goals are a little bit different these days. Now that cosplay has been getting a little bit more mainstream and it's becoming almost an industry, which is really weird. And so like there's a lot of people who are still view it as a hobby, but then some people want to try to make it business and are very goal orientated in that aspect, so they have a little bit of a different motivating factor for why they want to cosplay. So I mean I don't think either is good or bad, and it's just different. Like things have changed, and of course as the community grows, something changes too, and I don't think it's ever a good or bad change, it's just different. Mm-hmm. So I like it. I mean, I've been able to meet a lot more people since the community's grown. Like with now that Facebook and like a lot of social media is a much more big part of cosplay, I've been able to find cosplayers like all over the world and all over the country, and then like we'll find out we're going to be at the same convention. Whereas before, like I've just used like LiveJournal and like email mailing lists, so it was a little bit harder to find people. And so having those resources now, I like having this really big community because you can find people all walks of life and then that like the same thing that you're doing. So yeah,
there's definitely a benefit now of the technology we have now to access. Is that tweet somebody on Twitter, it's like your costume's awesome, and then you make friends and then meet up later on. I definitely agree with everything you say in terms of like how it is now and how it is back then. Mm-hmm. Speaking of industry, like what was the process when you're working on the Call to Cosplay
mm-hmm.
show?
Like the process of like the show, or just like how it came about, or
yeah, like how it came about, like how did they approach you and everything?
Well, at the time I was working with Crunchyroll as one of their Crunchyroll ambassadors, and they had reached out to me. The Victoria, who runs Crunchyroll ambassador program, she reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're doing this new show called Cosplay. We would really like you to be a judge." And I'm like, "Sure." And she kind of told me about the show and what the premise was, and I really liked the idea that it was focusing more on like the actual crafting of the show, like kind of showing like behind the scenes and like focusing on that, and like the actual person, you know, crafting the costume, and not so much kind of like other social drama type of issues that were going on. Because like if you constructed a costume, you know, like you don't have to like manufacture drama. There's enough drama with doing costumes. You know, you're there at like 2 o'clock in the morning before the convention, you're crying over yourself, oh my god, you know, you don't need to manufacture that stuff. So, but I like the idea of being able to have kind of competing in the sense of like a time crunch and you only have a few resources. I'm like, oh, that would really bring out your creativity. So it was a cool experience to kind of do it. They did another season, so but we weren't really involved with that season. So, but I liked it, and I'm hoping that the idea of focusing more on the crafting aspect of cosplay gets more like shown on like mainstream TV and stuff. So, but
yeah, definitely. It is. It's kind of weird, kind of seeing cosplay going to the mainstream.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it's like.
It's weird to go into Joann's and you can say, "Oh yeah, I'm working on a costume." And they're like, "Oh, you're going to Fanime?" I'm like, "What?" What?
Funny story. So I was making a costume prior to this Fanime, and my friend and I went to Joann's in Fremont, and I swear, like 3 or 4 people, like as we were shopping for our stuff, they're working there. It's like, "Are you going to Fanime?" It's like, how did you know?
We drive down here because I'm from Reno, so we had to drive, and we stopped in like Vacaville or something like that. Then we had to we had to go to Walmart, and we wanted to go to one before it closed. And so we went in there, and we were just buying like this really hodgepodge stuff, like little things that we forgot and stuff. And a lady in the store, she's like, "Oh, what are you making? What are you working on?" I'm like, "Oh, just getting like last minute supplies and like for a convention." Like, "Oh, are you going to Fanime?" I'm like, "What?" The person in the middle of like Central California knows what Fanime is. I'm like, "Oh my god."
Times have changed.
Yeah, like before, like I would, if you go to Joann's, they always ask, "Oh, what project are you working on?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know, I just, you know, make costumes." You know, so now they're like, they like press you and they're like, "Oh, cosplay, you do cosplay?" I'm like, "Oh my god, you know what cosplay is?"
Right.
Before you were just like, "Oh yeah," and like cosplay, and they're like, "What? What was that?"
Speaking of cosplay, out of the hundreds of costumes you made, any particular story that stood out to you, either be very good or very bad?
Oh man, I'm sure there is one. I can't think of one on the top of my head. I know I got to do a lot of cool things. Like recently, I got to do a lot of work with 2K promoting Borderlands the pre-sequel, and I love Borderlands. So like them being able to reach out to me and like help with their contest and like help promote the game and everything was like really cool. So like be able to work with a company that creates, you know, the source material that you just love. So you're kind of like really honored to do that. I can't really think of any bad experiences. Mostly if it's a bad experience, it's kind of generally because of my fault. Kind of like bad planning, or like I didn't, you know, I had to do too much work in the hotel room, so I don't have a lot of time like at the convention.
Right.
Or like I know one time I was competing and we totally just underestimated the level of difficulty of our costumes. So like our whole entire team for the competing was in the room for like 3 days. We didn't get to like any of the con, and then we did the competition, and like our costumes were really uncomfortable, and just kind of like, I mean, in places where well as we wanted to place, and so we're kind of like, oh man, all that work, you know. So, but you know, like stuff like that it's not the con's fault. It's like just our fault for not, you know, being better prepared and stuff like that. So, and just, you know, like sometimes when you're on a con, just, you know, things happen. Like when you go to a convention, you just kind of have to be prepared for anything. You have a plan, that's cute, you know? you can have a general idea of what you want to do, but like 9 times out of 10, like you're walking down the hall and you see someone you don't know, or like someone you haven't seen in a long time, you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you, and then you like end up walking with them and go hanging out with them for like an hour, and you're like, oh crap, I have to go do this. You know? So,
right, definitely.
Yeah.
In terms of, because we were talking about social media earlier, what's your thoughts on this kind of Facebook generation in terms of like, more cosplayers are inclined to become cosplay famous in a sense of like, I have 1,000, 2,000 likes, I'm quote unquote cosplay famous. What do you think of that general kind of thinking, or just kind of?
Personally, for me, I mean, I would like to preface that like everyone's motivations for cosplaying is their own, and like my views are completely different from a lot of people and stuff like that. And that's just kind of the philosophies I talk about are kind of like ones that I like to live by. So like for me, like with the whole entire costumes thing, like for me, like I don't even like that word. Like, people's like, oh no, you're costumes. Like no. I make costumes. I get to do some cool stuff, and that's kind of the thing. Like I make things. I try to make some money off of the skills that I've done. But like, I personally, I think if you're going into cosplay to just become famous, then you're kind of missing out on the whole entire reason of cosplaying and why. Like for me, I just got into it because I sounded really cool, and then I met people, and it was a lot of fun to put on costumes and like walk around and geek out over like Naruto and Sailor Moon and stuff, you know, and just kind of like be dorks about it. And so when I feel like if your main goal is just to become like famous, you're missing out on a lot of that fun aspect that really, and I think that fun and that closeness you have with friends that you make is what kind of fuels you to want to do more costumes. And you're like, you get that really, I guess, kind of like a adrenaline rush, I guess, and you just like, you want to keep doing that, but more, I feel like if a costume is you just kind of are trying to get to one goal, and you just like so driven to be famous that you kind of forgot to stop and smell the roses, if you want to say.
Yes, so. Yes. Oh man, everything you just said was just totally great with. Man, cause like I really, it's like I come from that era, like it's basically making costumes, making friends, and not about being famous.
Yeah, and for me, like costumes, like the costumes I choose are based on characters that I love. I've watched the series or played the game or something like that, and I go, oh my god, I want to do this. Like this costume I'm wearing now, like we watched, my friends like, oh, you should watch Yuri Kuma. I'm like, oh, okay, and I watched it, and I binged watched all of it in like 2 days. And like, we're making these costumes anyway. Like they're super cute, and I love the characters. So so for me, like I do it because I love it, and like if the costume just happens to be like a really sexy costume, well, it's because the character is sexy and I like the character. Like for me, I mean, everyone to each their own. If you want to do sexy costumes, great. But for me, it's not my jam. Like I like to be able to, I like doing how the character is. Like I don't even do a lot of like gender bent stuff. Like I try to do like actual cosplays and stuff if I want to do a guy character. I'm like, I want to be that character. Like I want to be as close to that character as possible. So.
Awesome. I always find it funny that girls can pull off guys so much better than guys in cosplays.
Yeah. Like yesterday, I was doing Naruto stuff, and we had I was Sakura, and my two friends were Naruto and Sasuke, so we had our little team 7, and of course, they're girls, so it was a group of us girls, and so but they make really convincing, they're really convincing as Sasuke and Naruto, so I'm like, oh my god, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's your next cosplays you're planning to think of making next?
Making next? Ooh. I don't know. I know I have some stuff for AX. I know I'm on a really big Naruto kick again. Some of my because it ended last fall and stuff, and now Gaiden's out. So all of us that are kind of really we're like, oh my god. So we kind of like on that kick right now. So I'll probably do more Naruto stuff for AX. And I have a group that we're doing these cute little monster girls from this weird hentai game. I don't even know. They just kind of hey, we're doing all this stuff. I'm like, oh, those are cute. So that's one of the few cases where I picked a character because I like the design a lot. Other than that, I'm not sure. There's, I don't know, I'll kind of generally just kind of make stuff as I see it, and so there's a few costumes on the bucket list.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do N7 armor from Mass Effect, so that's definitely, that's number one on my bucket list of cosplay things. But it's one of those ones that kind of intimidates me because I have a very clear vision of what I want it to look like, and I'm like, I don't know if I can make it look that way. So it's it's kind of intimidating, and I know it's gonna be a lot of work and a lot of money to do. So I'm just I'll wait. So.
Speaking of which, in terms of how you do your cosplays and how it begun as far in life with it, did you I mean, do you consider this part of a career, or do you just keep it as a hobby?
You know, it's kind of just matured into it, and it's when people say like, "Oh, you're a professional cosplayer," I don't think of myself that way. I think of it as more like I make costumes, and the costumes open up doors to do things that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So like, I make most of my money off of the skills I learned from doing costuming. So I do a lot of commission work, I do a lot of tailoring work, you know, and then I do also go to shows like this, and I'll have a table and I'll sell stuff at tables, you know, like crafts or shirts or prints or, you know, just a little bit of everything, you know. So, you know, like I don't make money just by making a costume and putting it on and walking around a convention like that. I mean, that would be really cool if you could, but that's not out there. So, so it's just kind of like I've developed skills that allow me to get jobs that, you know, I wouldn't have gotten otherwise if I didn't start cosplaying. So, and then also being in the community and working, you know, getting to know more people, you start making connections with people who do movies and stuff like that. And they're like, hey, we need like a seamstress, or we need someone that does pattern making, you know, type of thing. And so you can kind of get connections, and that allows you to do bigger and better things. So to me, it's cosplay is not, it's not the end means. It's kind of like a way to get to where I want to go. So
Okay, cool,
yeah.
Awesome. My last question is, we talked about this earlier. What other conventions are you planning to go to for the coming months or year?
I'm trying. Maybe there's talks of Wizard World Sacramento. I might go to that one. For sure, I have Anime Expo coming up in July, and now I'm going to be part of the Cosplay Senpais, which is their program, which is really cool because they want to bring in people who will mentor new cosplayers. And to me, I really like teaching people and kind of like, you know, I guess being that upperclassman and kind of like, come here, ask me questions, I want to teach you stuff, you know? It's like, I want to make your costumes awesome, you know? It's like, let me help you. So I really like being a part of that program. I really like promoting the positivity and like crafting within cosplay. So being able to be in that position to help promote that and instill on new cosplayers, or even beginning cosplayers, or even older cosplayers, I feel very honored to be a part of that. So, so that was EX. Probably Kamikaze. I've been doing Kamikaze Lodge for years.
Okay.
There's a local convention in Reno called Snafu Con. It's a small little anime con that's been growing. I usually do stuff for them. So, but you know, it's kind of depends. Like, you know, I'll get contacted every once in a while by a con. Sometimes, since I'm in Reno, like I'll go down to like Bay Area stuff occasionally and stuff. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for your time for
No problem.
this interview, for sure.